already in the term. I know how busy it is this time of year. My name's Eleanor Loughlin, and I look after the Student Study Skills programme. So what Anthony asked me to come and do today was talk about how you can make the most of your voice. This ties in very heavily with, as you'll see as we go through, it ties in very heavily with how you manage nervousness. So what we'll be doing today is I'll be concentrating on the voice, actually thinking about how we produce the voice, the different factors involved and the sorts of things you need to be mindful of, and some of the reasons why you might, if you're giving presentations, be having problems with your voice. We'll also think about how you can look after your voice. You will inevitably go into some branch of professional activity where you are using your voice a lot. And many students go on in academia or go into teaching, and those are two areas where voice therapists spend a lot of time dealing with voice problems. So if you can develop some good habits now for looking after your voice, then that will serve you well in your career. Do stop me at any point if you have any questions. I have a handout here, and as I said, I'll email you the slides at the end. I think you come to a biology lecture now, a diagram like that on the front. But I think it's important to think about how the voice is actually produced when we think about voice production. So this is a diagram of the voice tract, and as it shows here, there are three main areas to consider. There's the air pressure system, the breathing in effect. There's the changing the breath into a noise, and that happens in your larynx, in your voice box. And then there's what goes on in your head. The articulation, turning that sort of buzzy noise into words. And also the excuse me, the resonation. So how do you get the volume? How do you get the tone? All that's happening in the head. So what I want to start with is the breath, because in effect, the breath is the most important thing to be mindful of. The voice is quite literally born on the breath. It's as simple as that. And I've often found over the years that if somebody's having problems with their voice, it often stems from the fact that they've not got their breathing right. It can have all sorts of impacts. If you think about it, if you're not breathing deeply, you're not going to have enough breath to get to the end of a sentence. You're not going to have enough breath to be able to project. If you're shallow breathing, that could be tied in with nervousness. So deep breathing is absolutely key to presentations. So, as I said in the course description for this, there is a little bit of participation. So I'm not going to ask you to stand up and do any talking or anything, but what I would like you to do is, if you could, just see if we've got an even number of people. Yes, we have, brilliant. If you could stand up, and I might have asked you to do this if you've been to one of my other presentation session courses. If you could stand up and face somebody and breathe deeply. And what I want you to do, breathe as deeply as you can. While you're breathing deeply, I want you to watch your partner and see if you can tell by looking at them if they're breathing deeply. Okay, so how can you tell somebody's breathing deeply by looking at them? What's moving? What's changing about their body? So if you can stand up, face somebody, and breathe deeply. See if you can see any movement there. Should see some movement. Take as much air in as you can. Can your partner see any movement? Okay, what's moving? Is anything moving? What's moving if it is? What?
Chest.
Shoulders. We're getting some chest movement. Yeah, shoulders going up and down. Okay, sit down for a minute. Let's just think about deep breathing then. That's absolutely normal in adults. Can I just ask, is anyone a singer, a trained singer? What parts of the body should you be seeing moving, do you think, when somebody is breathing deeply, really breathing deeply?
The lower down parts, not like deep inside.
Absolutely, it's down here. What happens when you're a baby? You're born able to breathe very deeply. Babies are great at it. That's how they get so much volume out of those tiny little things. But as you grow up, you sort of rein in your voice, and you rein in and you control your breathing. I mean, your parents say, stop shouting, and you realise that as an adult you have to rein that in. And most adults are actually quite shallow breathers, and shallow breathing is focused on this area, so it's, or a little bit of expansion here. But really deep breathing is right down to here. So singers, anyone does yoga? There's the emphasis there on really taking the breath in. So to really get back to deep breathing, you've got to start to do exercises and things just to remind yourself what real deep breathing is. When you start really deep breathing again, if you've had a gap, it sometimes feels a bit weird because your intercostal muscles between your ribcage are actually stretching in places they haven't quite stretched before, and there's this movement going on here. But that's what you need to be aiming for. So we'll just try a very simple little exercise just to get you thinking about this. Now, actually for the camera I'll stand up while I'm doing this, but you can do this while you're sitting down. If you sit with your back straight, your arms at your side or just on your legs uncrossed, and I want you to just close your eyes and imagine that you're at the beach and you've got one of those inflatable swim rings that children wear around their waist, and I want you to breathe as if you're pushing the air down to fill that. So you're pulling the air all the way down to your tummy. So you're trying to inflate round here. While you're doing this, keep your shoulders absolutely relaxed. So take as much breath in through your nose, and then in your own time just release it naturally through your mouth. So just for a moment, just close your eyes and have a go at that. And you can put your hand on your tummy, see if you can feel some movement there while you're doing it. Okay, how do you feel? How does that feel? Yeah.
Feel more centered and relaxed.
Yeah, that's the other great thing about deep breathing. As I said, it all ties in with nervousness. If you think what goes on in your body when you're nervous, you've got this adrenaline rush, you're in a sort of fright or flight situation, and your breath often gets quite shallow. If you can start deep breathing, that gets more oxygen to your brain. It convinces your body that actually I'm not in such a perilous state anymore. This isn't such a threat, and the nervousness passes more quickly. So certainly when you're sitting there maybe preparing for a presentation, maybe you're about to speak in a seminar, or you're waiting outside a room before an interview to go in, deep breathing can be really important, helping you to get past the peaks of nervousness. And also if you're in a presentation and sometimes people feel their breath getting quite shallow and quite sort of gasping for air, then stop take a drink of water, take a deep breath. The audience won't notice. It'll seem like a moment for you, but the audience won't notice, and then you can carry on, you'll feel more centered. So deep breathing is absolutely key, as I've said, to the breath. But part of it is how you release that breath as well. So just want to try something now. I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath all at the same time, and then I'd like you to release that breath with an ah sound. And we'll just see how long we can keep that going. Okay? So you're going to take a deep breath. Good. Let's try it again. We'll just try it once more. So taking as I'm just watching the clock here, seeing how long that breath is being held for. That note's being held for. So we'll take another deep breath. Not bad. You're sort of around 14 to 16 seconds. You should be aiming for about 20 seconds. So it's a nice little, very, very simple little exercise. I mean, ideally, go for singing lessons is the best way to improve your breathing and your release of breath, so to speak. But this is a simple way to monitor. Try it yourself in the comfort of your own home. Try this exercise again. If you find you're not much over 10 seconds, again, that can be part of the problem. There isn't enough breath there to get to the end of a sentence. So try that, and it's quite nice to do as a sort of warm-up exercise. When you know you've got a presentation, just as an athlete wouldn't run a race without warming up. So it's important as a speaker to warm up your voice. Now, having conversations and those sorts of things are absolutely key in that. You should never go into a presentation not having spoken all day. It's not good for your voice. But things like this, and I'll show you another one in a while, and other things can be very useful in getting your voice warmed up. So, any questions about that? Okay, let's move on to the next part of the body then, the larynx or voice box. This is where the vocal folds are situated. You may have heard them called vocal cords, which implies almost like the strings of an instrument, but they're not. They actually look like this. And they move a little bit like windscreen. If you watch them moving if you're looking down somebody's throat, they move like windscreen wipers, but they're also this sort of motion going on as well. So the movement is quite complex. How fast are they moving to create this rasping noise? Well, I think that's a good indication there of the range of movement they have. And you can see they are moving very, very quickly. So, 200 times a second is pretty reasonable, but, for a singer, over 1,000 times a second. So this is, part of the reason why singers in particular put so much emphasis on looking after their voices. But certainly problems can arise with a voice, not if you're hitting the high C's, but if you are presenting or speaking a lot. There are, of course, differences in pitch due to your age and your sex. So you can see the link between the length of the vocal fold and the pitch of the voice. So, of course, men have deeper voice, children have higher pitched voices. You can change the pitch of your voice. This is something that voice coaches can help with, and certainly the most famous example in recent British history was the Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher. if you listen to recordings of her early in her career, she's very girly voice, but by the end of her career, she's right down there and she sounds like a man, almost. And that was through vocal coaching. She realised that then in politics, to succeed, she needed that sort of tone to her voice. So if you're not comfortable with the sound of your voice, I can't help you with that, but voice coaches can. So it is something you can work with. So let's think about the vocal folds, and they actually change the breath into a rasping noise. It's actually quite hard to feel where your vocal folds are. You don't actually feel them moving around. There is one thing, and don't try this now, but you can try it yourselves. One way of actually, you get a sense, you can feel them if you try this. If you take the articulation out of the voice and are left with a sort of gurgling noise, and then rather than releasing that on an outward breath, you turn it to an in-breath, you can feel the folds moving. I know sometimes singers use this as a warm-up. Have you ever? Yeah. It's quite an interesting one, but as I say, I'm not going to ask you to do it. It sounds like a death rattle. I'm not going to ask you to do this now, but I'll just show you. Then you can have a go yourself. So you'd start with a ah. So you're going down to that sort of raspy noise, and then you change that outward breath to an inward breath. So it goes ah, ah. And if you do that, you do get a bit of a sense of where they are. As I say, it can be quite a nice little warm-up exercise. Can be quite alarming though to the people around you, so be careful with that one. So your vocal folds, you've really got to look after them, and I'll be talking about different things that can impact on them. But if you are feeling nervous, one of the things is often your muscles tighten up, and that can impact here on your neck, on your head. So you really need to be relaxed when you're giving presentation. Now in the handout I've given you on pages 2 and 3, you'll see there's some information about different relaxation techniques. I just want us to try one of these now, just a very potted version of the progressive muscular relaxation technique. Has anyone used this before? It's a really neat way of relaxing, because if you tell somebody relax, they relax to a point. But if you use this technique, you find that they relax more. What you do with the progressive muscular relaxation technique is that you tighten your muscles. So you really tighten them and then you relax them. So when you do that, you get a sense of greater relaxation than if you're just told to relax. So let's try that now. Again, I normally sit down for this, so you stay seated, but I'll stand in this instance. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take, we'll take 3 stages of it. You can do it lying down, work your way up your entire body, which is great, but we won't do that now. We'll just do 3 stages just to give you a sense of what it feels like. So again, if you can sit with your legs uncrossed, your hands, it can be nice to have them palm up on your legs like that, just resting, or to the side. And again, I'd like to close your eyes for this. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to clench your fists. Clench your hands up into fists as tight as you can, and feel that tightness going up your arms, through your elbows, up into your shoulders. Okay, now feel how constricted you feel. I'm going to ask you to hold that for 5 seconds. I'm going to count you down, and then I want you to release your arms and your hands and relax. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, relax. You feel that sort of wave of relaxation going through your arms. It might feel a bit heavy. We're going to do the same thing again, but this time I want you to start with your tummy. So tighten up your tummy muscles, tighten up your rib cage, take that tightness right up into your shoulders, right across your back. Again, now imagine you're feeling so nervous that you're that tight. It's very hard to breathe effectively like that. So again, we're going to hold that for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, relax. And finally, I'd like you to take the tightness back into your shoulders, this time going up through your neck, into your head, into your face muscles. So feel the tightness there. We'll hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Do you feel relaxed? Nobody's fallen asleep. Good. There are other ideas here, and also I should say on the counselling services websites, they have some really excellent relaxation resources. They have some relaxation audios that you can listen to that are really excellent, absolutely geared up for university. So if tension beforehand is something you feel really badly, these sorts of techniques, they really can help release that. I should say, though you can't do that whole progressive relaxation stuff just as you're about to give a presentation, something that you can do, say you're sitting there waiting, you can tighten up your hands, your fists, and you can tighten up your feet and then relax. And you get that little wave of relaxation just going through your body, and that can be a really, really good thing to remind you to relax. Any questions about that? Okay, let's think then about the next stage. What happens to this rasping noise? It changes in the head into this recognisable voice. And articulation's an amazing thing. If you think about a child learning to speak, usually the first sorts of sounds they're making are the m, p, b. And if you think about how you make those sounds, they're right at the front of your mouth, so m, p, b, b. So it makes sense that those are the first sort of signs of articulation. As you grow, usually by the age of 8, in your native language, you've mastered most of the sounds. But if you think about how different sounds are made, so the s, the j, the ch, all different parts of your mouth are coming into contact, and these are all the different parts of contact that are key in articulation. So different sounds, different movements in the mouth. It's a very complicated process. To give you a sense of this, on the back page of the handout, I've given you some tongue twisters. What I'd like you to do in pairs is have a go at these tongue twisters. So say it aloud to your partner, say it as quickly as you can, and think about which are the easy ones and why, which are the difficult ones and why, and is it to do with the articulation? What are the sorts of movements that are happening in the mouth? So I'll give you a few minutes to have a go at those. Six up. Six, hits. While these breathe clear, breathe these breathe blue. Freezing breathe make these three. That's what means breathe free. How can a plant run in a clean air? Separate Sainsbury's sells this one. That middle bit there. I'm anticipating the next word so much that I can't say shit. Okay, can I just ask you then, which did you find the most difficult? Maybe number 5? 1, 5? Yeah, 5 and 6. Why? Anyone any thoughts on what it is with the articulation that's difficult? Yeah.
Maybe with the number 5, because you're changing between sh and sounds, you're going from the back of the mouth to the front of the mouth.
Absolutely. So if you think what she's doing, it's sort of a strange roll thing on the tongue, but the sound is absolutely tongue behind the teeth. So it's a very different movement. And also your eye is seeing, you've said a sh, and you're almost anticipating another sh, but you're going to a s. So there's that triple going there. Anything else? Any others that was? What about number 5? Well, no, sorry, number 5. But what about number 6? Those who said number 6.
I think for me it's just that then it's not the act of sort of saying it that is hard. It's that the 3 free doesn't. The free then doesn't sound right.
Yeah, yeah, 3, 3. It's just sort of one sound difference, isn't it? It doesn't sound. And also that one's pretty much nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, the logic of it. If the logic isn't immediately apparent, you know, then that can impact on it as well. Which ones did you find easy?
Separate Sainsbury's.
Number 2.
Number 2 and Seth at Sainsbury's. Why?
It's all the same.
Mm. Same with Seth at Sainsbury's. Not too much of a. It tends to be there. It's not the S sounds. It's the thick socks transition. Because the temptation to go 6 socks or thick socks. So there's also the fact that some of you may already know Peter Piper. You may be familiar with that. And the thing about tongue twisters is if you practice them, you can get better at them. So what are the relevance of tongue twisters other than thinking about how we articulate to presentations? Well, this is one of the reasons why it is so essential that when you prepare a presentation, your preparation involves speaking it out. Not just reading it, but actually allowing time to practice it. Because it's only when you articulate the words that you will realise whether or not there is in fact a tongue twister in your presentation. There might very well be a phrase or something that on the paper looks completely innocuous, but when you actually come to say it, you trip up. You've then got choices. Are you going to take it out? Think of a different way to word it. Or you can, as we do as children, you can practice the tongue twister. I'm by trade a classical archaeologist, and one of the things that I always used to trip up on, there's a Roman political office called a Duria Quinquinalis. A number of times I tripped over that. So I thought, right, now I'm just going to sit down and practice Duria Quinquinalis. Now no problems. It might be that there are things like that in your subject area, that there's no way around it. It's not called anything else. You've got to use those words, those phrases. And the best thing to do is to practice them. Get your voice used to, your mouth used to that combination of movements. So, speaking out is very important. Also, tongue twisters can be a really nice warm-up. Actually saying some tongue twisters, getting your muscles, your mouth moving. Talking to an actor friend of mine about this, and he was saying that one of the ones he uses is a name, Peggy Babcock. It doesn't sound like much of a tongue twister, but if you try saying it very quickly, Peggy Babcock, you really feel your mouth moving around quite a lot. So it can be something quite simple, but pick something that's going to get your mouth moving. That can be a good part of a presentation warm-up. Some tongue twisters. Any questions about that?
When I find that like I'm quite stressed or nervous or whatever, I find that sometimes like my articulation can go a bit ugh. Is that normal?
It is, and often what's happening is if you are stressed and you're speaking to a group, often you speed up. And that's often when we trip up, when we're speaking more quickly. What can be a good thing to do is actually, if you're practicing, record yourself and just see if you are speeding up. The way to address this is to get into the habit when you're practicing is try and speak too slowly. And what you'll find is that translates into a good speed when you're actually speaking your presentation. The other factor here is how much information have you got to get through. Very often people are speaking too quickly because they've got loads of information, but people can't keep up with that, and you're more likely to trip up or lose your way. So you're actually better to have a reasonable amount of information that you can present at a reasonable speed. but certainly speed is a big, big factor in articulation. Also, if you practice, as I say, your mouth becomes used to it, so that could help with that as well. If you can practice it, well, a few times at least, then the mouth is used to that sequence of words, and the trip-ups are less likely to happen. Any other questions? Yeah.
I find that sometimes I tend to accumulate too much saliva in my mouth when I'm speaking, and then that makes me not articulate clearly. So how do I kind of stop that from?
Do you drink water while you're presenting?
Oh, not whilst I'm presenting.
This is, I'm going to come on to, but actually taking a drink of water might help clear that a little bit. That would probably, I think that would probably be the best bet there. There are all sorts of other reasons I'm going to come on to why you should drink water while you're presenting, but try that, see if that will help. Just finally to say about the projecting your voice. If you have been told you speak very quietly, it can be a good idea to film yourself when you're practicing and have a look at how your mouth's moving. Sometimes somebody will say, I speak very, very quietly, and I'll say, well, present to me. And to me, they look almost like a ventriloquist. The mouth isn't moving. There's a voice coming out, but there's not a whole lot of movement going on in the mouth. You've got to open your mouth for the noise to come out. Now, how wide should you be opening your mouth? Your mouth should open about the width of 2 fingers at some point during your presentation. Not all the time, because then you can't articulate, but your mouth should be opening. It should be opening at sort of width at various points. Another very simple warm-up exercise you can do that gets your mouth opening wider is the R noise we were doing before. Try doing that, but instead of an R noise, try it with a and then move on to a B, and then move on to an R with your mouth wide open. So you're making that transition from the closed mouth to the B, which is partially open, to an R, and that gets your mouth just opening wider. And if you try that yourself, you'll find the volume will go up. As you get to that R, you'll be getting louder. So that could be quite a nice thing to do. But as I say, often if you're not projecting, it can be that the mouth isn't opening wide enough. Another factor that ties in with all this, that can impact on all of this, is your posture when you're presenting. Now, of course, move around, use your arms. I'm not saying don't do that. But if you get into a twisty position or a swaying around position, that's not good for your voice. It's not great. So what does good posture look like when you're presenting? I'd like you to stand up for a moment. Just share with you 3 things to get you thinking about your posture. Now, the thing to avoid is the sort of stand to attention. That's not what you're after. You're after something where your body's relaxed, and you're looking forward. So if you're somebody who, when you present, you tend to face the screen and do that, that's putting a lot of strain on your voice. That's not a great position to be in. You need to be facing your audience. So how should the posture be? Well, feet are slightly apart, parallel, and don't get into a swaying motion or cross legs. And in terms of how straight you should be, a nice way to think about it is 3 things to remember. Firstly, imagine that you are a Frankfurter sausage, okay? And you have one of those little sausage strings on the top of your head. And like all sausages, you sort of relax into a curve. But what you've got to do is just ever so slightly pull that little string, just so it's pulling you up ever so slightly. And then think about what's happening here. If your shoulders are coming forward, imagine you have, well, a bolero jacket, which is a jacket with laces up the back, and somebody's just ever so slightly tighten that, not to that extreme, but just taking your shoulders back. So you've got that space really to breathe. And then finally, what's happening with the pelvis? Well, a good way to make sure you're right down there is to imagine you are a dinosaur with a very long dinosaur tail, big heavy dinosaur tail. And that, the weight of that tail is just tipping your pelvis that way slightly. So you're not settling into that sort of a stance. Just there. So if you think sausage, bolero jacket, dinosaur tail, then you're in a good stance. So, okay, sit down. So I'm not saying, as I say, you can't move around and stuff, but if you get into a peculiar position and you're not feeling that that's a good position to be in, or if you're in a situation maybe where you should be in a formal stance, then those are things to get you back to that position. Any questions about that? Okay, what I'm going to finally move on today then is just to think about looking after your voice. As I've said, teachers, professionals increasingly are going to get help for various conditions. The age group, the group in society most at risk are women between the age of 20 and 50. So watch out. What can go wrong? Let's have a look at vocal folds. This isn't too pretty, but you can see there where the N is at the top. Those are little nodules. These are these sort of benign growths that like a callus that can form on the vocal folds. At the bottom there you've got a polyp. These can be in pairs, but often they are just single, and you can see it's a larger growth. Now imagine these vocal folds coming together 200 times a second, and not a second, a minute, and this is the what's going on there, what's hampering the movement. It's not surprising that with people with nodules and polyps do lose their voices. So how do we avoid these, but what can be the causes? Well, unfortunately, allergies can be for polyps in particular. You may have heard of other polyps, nasal polyps and things like that. So if you do suffer from hay fever and things like that, that can impact on your voice. Smoking, as I've said, being tense and anxious can cause problems. Now, caffeine and alcohol, this can be a problem, particularly the coffee, because a lot of people say, well, when I'm about to give a presentation, I have a coffee, it helps me relax. But actually, from your voice's point of view, it's not good. It's drying out your vocal folds. And talking loudly and singing. So if you are a teacher, or if you're involved in any activities where you are talking loudly or singing, these are risk factors. The thing about problems with the voice is, if you look at those symptoms, you could put them down to a range of things, couldn't you? You could say, I've got a sore throat, or I'm just tired. But if you do notice these things coming back, say you do move into an area where you're using your voice a lot, and you notice these symptoms coming through again and again, then it really is worth getting some help. I should say, if you do, and as I say, many people do go on into academia and also teaching professions, be really careful at the beginning of the academic year, because the summer you're not putting your voice through as much strain as you do during term time. And very often academics say, well, I always get a sore throat at the beginning of the year. Well, it's not surprising, because you're suddenly asking your voice to deliver 5 lectures a week or whatever after having a quiet summer. So be careful that you do watch out for these symptoms. So what do you need to do? Drink lots of water. I always carry a bottle around with me, because you can't guarantee that there will be water at any venue. So I really recommend that. Varying the tone and the speed, that can help, because if you think it's different ways of using your voice, so the strain isn't constant. Can you take a break? If you're giving a long presentation, certainly, I mean, as today I've asked you to do various things at different points. That's partly because from your concentration point of view. If I stood and talked for an hour, you would zone out. But if you break it up, people concentrate more. But also it gives your voice a rest. Your posture, facing forward, plants in the room. Now, why on earth plants in the room, other than they look nice? What effect anyone think that a plant might have in a room?
Oxygen.
Humidity. Yeah, it's about the environment. And certainly I find if I give a lot of presentations in these sort of in the very new air-conditioned lecture theatres, I'm really, after a few days. It is important. So if you are in a situation where you're giving a lot of presentations in a particular room, smuggle a few plants in. You know, think about the air, the environment. So these are quite simple things you can do to look after your voice, but I would say the single most important thing is water. And just to say, room temperature water is the best. Okay, that's pretty much all the material I have. Just to flag up that as part of the Central Academic Skills Programme this term, there are a number of presentation skills workshops. Some of you may have come to giving successful presentations which I ran last term, but I'm running one again this term. The Presentation Skills Advanced is being run at Stockton this term, but the other two there, giving presentations, how to answer questions, so that one's looking at you know, you can prepare a presentation, but how on earth do you prepare for dealing with the questions at the end? Strategies for that. And the finding images for your presentation assignment, that's being run by library staff with a specialism in looking through different appropriate databases and resources for images. So that's a useful one as well. I'll email you these slides so you will have the link if you want to look at the dates for any of these. So, any questions? Yeah.
Just briefly, you said that room temperature water was best, but why not nice cold grass?
A nice coat. If you well, did anyone do the ice bucket challenge? Yes, of course you did. Yeah. Well, or if you didn't, if you watch videos of people doing that, the water goes on, they go, they tighten up, they tense up. That's the impact of ice water on the throat. It's that little, and you don't want that. You want to keep it lubricated. Yeah. Also, still water's better than fizzy water. That I don't understand the science of, but that is apparently the case. As I said, alcohol and coffee, caffeine drinks dry the throat. Something I didn't put on there is, and this one's a little bit more, people aren't so sure, but a lot of people do say it's the case, avoiding dairy products. Have you found that as a singer?
Yeah, I always stuck with that because it does just like it just sits in your throat and kind of holds it.
Yeah, it can do, and that might be an issue. I mean, somebody mentioned the saliva build-up and that gloopy feeling. Actually, avoiding dairy products before a presentation might help with that as well. It's worth a go. So, yeah, it's a sort of strange area that to think about. But for me, the simplest solution is, as I say, just walk around with my own bottle of water. Then I know it's room temperature. Anything else? Okay, well, just finally to say, if at any point you individually or as a group are giving a presentation and you would like some feedback on a practice, you can contact me and either I or one of my colleagues can come along, watch your presentation. Unless we know your subject area, we can't comment on the content, but we can give you some feedback on your presentation technique and possibly the structure of the presentation. We also have a video camera like that, so we can even record it for you and give you a copy of it too. So that's something, one-to-one support we can provide, or as I say, to groups of people as well. Okay, thank you very much. I'll leave it there.